As the caravan set out along the southern coast, cutting inland through some well-travelled tracks that seemed to be in some disrepair, I asked our local guide why every turn of this trade route took such a wide path around every stand of woods that I could see. The guide, a dark-skinned wood elf named Feather, shook his head and said there was no safety in woodlands for my people. He assumed I was human. Many elves do, and even for a wood elf this one was abrupt and curt with his answers to any queries I had, almost like every question I asked was some sort of challenge to his role as our local expert. So I soon backed off and instead asked our local hire, a Wainwright and pretty phenomenal shot with a hurled hand axe named Rigori Zalwyn, not a dwarf but a swarthy human of Tweakin descent, who was born in the Eastern Shire, a region fairly densely populated by dwarven people. He wore the Hammer of Moradin on a cord round his neck and did not speak a single word to our elven guide the entire trip as far as I recall. Maybe a few sharp comments when we were struggling at the ford of the River Talar and every hand in the party was needed to lift one side so a broken wheel could be repaired. Things were decidedly frosty right at the start of our journey, and it felt important to understand why. Our survival could come down to something so trivial as one team member not speaking up at a critical moment. According to Rigori, the area I knew as Lapalaya, the cities of the southern coast of the Shining Sea, was no more. It had become more of a lawless wasteland. All these woods we passed were less than 100 years old, new growth painstakingly restored by the efforts of the local elven people, and they did not welcome outsiders to this recovering land, now known as the Elf Harrow. Although our path was a well-travelled one historically, these days the road from the sea, passing along the Dun Hills, more like mountains, and skirting a land known as the Bandit Wastes on our way to the town of Lapelgard, was quite a lot more dangerous, and Rigori warned me that if we spotted a patrol on horseback, it was likely from there in Lapelgard. If on foot, we should be prepared for combat, as it might be bandits or, and he just jerked his chin in Feather's direction, indicating without words that the elves in this region were quite hostile and not much better than bandits themselves. On the afternoon of the second day of our journey, when more stories were told and Feather came to understand my actual heritage, his demeanour around me changed quite a lot. So it seemed his animosity was reserved mainly for humans and not the Hin. But I'm no great judge of the emotions and motivations of elven people, and Feather shared next to nothing about himself with any of us. But just before we reached the town of Dungar, and he parted company with his payment, the only story I did manage to coax out of him was when I asked what the most dangerous monster in the Misty Vale was, an ancient forest that was located just beyond the Dun Hills, and he told me at some length over a meal of wine and some very delicious olive-stuffed roasted peppers about a creature called the Jabberwock. This is a monster I'm happy to report that I have never personally seen, and I'm quite sure that I never want to. It was also the main excuse Feather gave us as to why we were avoiding the new woods springing up all along the coast, but I suspect he just steered us clear of the territory of his own people, as they'd reclaimed it as their own. Easy to mistake for a true dragon, the Jabberwock is actually a dragon kin, one that the Wood Elves know of for a span of years greater than any human city that now stood, he said. My understanding, on later investigation and fact checks in the library in Halrua, is that the Jabberwock could be found in the land of the Fae, and our elven guide meant that the creatures had arrived on Toril around the same time as the original migration of the Green Elves, in very ancient eras lost to history. Most people have no idea exactly what a Jabberwock looks like. Some property of the Feywild perhaps prevents a person from having a full and accurate recollection of meeting the monster, just as those who return from the lands of Fey quite often have no memory of what they did there, as though waking from a dream. It just fades from the mind. This is clearly evident in the collected lore of the Jabberwock over the history of Dungeons & Dragons, as there are contradictions present every time the monster has been presented in the various editions, appearing first in Dragon Magazine issue 54, printed in October 1981 for the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Later included and updated for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition's Monster Compendium Annual Volume 3, which was printed in 1996. And finally, the most recent listing inside The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, published in September 2021. The important thing is that while the details may vary, the essence of what the Jabberwock is carries through on each of these versions, and going over all of them side by side, you can see the logical progression the lore has taken, adapting itself for each new edition, 15 and then 25 years apart from each other. The Jabberwock is a huge reptilian beast which inhabits light forests or broken wastelands, with a particular fondness for inhabiting more recent ruins located in areas where disasters have laid waste to the land, but is now regrowing its forests. The creatures resemble dragons in many respects, enough so that they can be called draconic creatures while still not being true dragons. There may be some variation among them back in their native environment of the vast and variable Feywild, so it's perfectly fine for a DM to adapt them to being wingless, for example, or swapping some of the confusion effects for a sound-based to a gaze-based attack, and giving them draconic traits such as elemental resistances or a supernatural aura of fear. In the Feywild, they tend to take on some of the dominant traits that a local Feylord will instill in the region they dominate. So some Jabberwock can look extremely fearsome, or they may appear far more comical or cute, which does nothing to reduce how tremendously aggressive and dangerous they are. Adult Jabberwock are formidable, with a long neck as flexible as a tentacle, a body that is 30 feet long, 8 foot tall at the shoulder, and a thin tail that reaches another 25 feet beyond the body. They're lean, very tough, and have quite different proportions to a true dragon. Some have learned to hoard treasure to attract greedy prey, some do it for their own pleasure, but mostly it's because, unlike dragons, they don't have a strong elemental essence and have a serious appetite for meat, particularly human meat, which they prefer above all others, even elves and halflings. Jabberwocks are solitary beasts, coming together only during their violent mating season. They hibernate during long periods of intense cold and are most active at brillig, or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The Jabberwock's lair is generally found in a cave or underground in a moist, cool and dark place, since these are the conditions necessary for the maturation of their eggs. 2 to 8 eggs are laid after the spring mating season, where only one adult, usually a female, survives. The eggs mature and hatch in roughly 5 years. They are generally laid in different places each year, since Jabberwock hatchlings tend to eat unhatched eggs where they can find them. In the Feywild, mating can occur at fairly random times, as there is no variation in seasons. Rather, seasons act more like geographical traits, regional effects and the like. Nobody is quite sure how long Jabberwock live, but all are quite certain that, if ever put into captivity, within a few weeks to a month the Jabberwock will die. Oddly enough, the legendary creature's ties to the Feywild mean that the Fey realm perpetuates their existence, so it may not be possible to ever fully exterminate them, as when a mature Jabberwock is slain, another one always seems to appear, not suddenly, but sometime within 3 to 24 years later, somewhere suitable within 1,000 miles of where the last Jabberwock was killed. Since there are no accounts of juveniles being observed on the prime material plane, it seems that they have the means to cross over into the Fey realm and remain there until they're fully grown, which can take quite some time, thankfully. Unless they happen to be in certain parts of the Fey where time flows differently, but that's a subject for another sage. Another reason that Jabberwocks have a reputation for being near impossible to kill is the fact that they can regenerate even more tenaciously than a troll. The Jabberwock regains 10 hit points at the start of its turn. If the Jabberwock takes slashing damage, this trait doesn't function at the start of the next turn. The Jabberwock dies only if it starts its turn with 0 hit points and doesn't regenerate. Note that this is not impaired by fire or acid damage, and also, when you look at the Jabberwock, its gangly limbs, upright stance and loathsome creeping slither, its baleful gaze and weird snapping mouth, those long talons and its green hue to its hide. This could well be a troll dragon if they ever become fully native to the prime material plane. It's just a thought. Coloration is actually variable between greens and tarnished looking golden tans, and the body is protected by armor plates, while the soft underbelly is protected by its crouching, slithering style of motion. Its body is very flexible and it tends to snake its way around almost as much as it uses its legs, with the belly barely 2 feet above the ground most of the time. However, it also has the ability to stand upright and even take a few steps at a time in a biped stance, which is freaky to witness and quite outlandish for a dragon, particularly as its limbs end with digits equipped with wickedly curved talons, about at least the size of short swords and the same glossy black as goblin claws. In combat, which is almost certain with every encounter, the Jabberwock will be eager to attack, singling out one target at a time and savaging it with a flurry of claws and great rending strikes as it tries to literally tear any humanoids apart and gobble them down in great sprays of hot blood. It will also make sweeping attacks with its tail, which strikes as hard as a great club. One thing that's not mentioned in 5th edition is that the other two versions of the Jabberwock also feature the stats for its bite attack. The Jabberwock has a jaw well stocked with fangs, particularly the front end of its mouth, and it can attack with its bite with the same 15-foot reach its tail attack has. Perhaps it's the reduced size of the latest incarnation, dropping it down to a merely huge size, where usually it would be much larger and with a bite capable of swallowing a person whole. Just as well, considering I've not even gotten to its ranged attacks yet. One of the most dramatic changes to the stats in the lore of the Jabberwock concerns its burbling sound and its terrible gaze. Some earlier accounts say that the gaze can cause paralysis. The latest listing actually has the eyes jetting out a 5-foot wide and 120-foot long line of fire. Unless its eyes are blinded, the Jabberwock can do this each round if it rolls a 5 or 6 on a 6-sided die each turn. Living creatures caught in the effect of that gaze must roll over 18 on a roll of a 20-sided die, adding any dexterity saving throw bonus, or they take the damage of 1d8 times 7. Even if they make that saving throw number, or better, they still have to take half that burnination damage, the poor bastards. There's no mention if this also affects flammable structures. I presume so. I mean, trees are living creatures, and the Jabberwock lives in a forest, and the flames don't stop its regenerating flesh from healing, so this thing can set the whole forest on fire with you in it, and be just fine. You are, on the other hand, going to get barbecued the longer the combat with the dragon is going to take. If you wish to add some extra spice to the flaming gaze, have victims who get any damage also roll to save versus fear with a wisdom saving throw. I know that would freak me out. Reminds me of that scene where Tom Cruise ran from the Martian war machine in War of the Worlds, with people getting vaporized all around him. A character might sprint for safety and suddenly notice that they are completely covered in the ashy remains of their immolated friends, and that's got to be fairly upsetting. Jabberwocks have an armor class of 18 and 10d12 plus 50, or between 60 and 170 with an average of 115 hit points, a strength of 20, 12 dexterity, 20 constitution, immunity to any and all poisons. Also immune to being charmed or the frightened condition, and the only vulnerability it has is it takes double damage from Vorpal swords, which is absolutely a Fae trait. Legendary creatures of the Fae are part of the stories that deeply influence and transform the native landscape into fantastic realms of fable. If located in such an environment, it may be that the only thing that can truly kill a Jabberwock is the lethal kiss of the enchanted Vorpal blade. The mind of the Jabberwock is thankfully no better than a rabid wolverine. It has an intelligence of only 4, a wisdom of 7, and a charisma of 11. It can't speak and even really understand languages, yet it has exceptional senses, with a passive perception of 18 and plus 8 to any active perception checks. It has true sight out to a range of 120 feet, allowing it to see right through illusions, invisibility and such. Also, the Jabberwock can unerringly track any creature it has wounded in the last 24 hours, and it knows the distance and direction to its quarry as long as the two of them are on the same plane of existence. Another clearly magical ability. In older lore, a Jabberwock could detect the existence of a Vorpal sword from up to 1 mile away, but not its exact location or direction. They really hate Vorpal swords. A Jabberwock will seek out the wielder of a Vorpal blade and stalk them through all manner of terrain, waiting until the sword's owner sets it aside or is asleep. Then it will charge the party, ignoring all other threats to its safety, attempting to vanquish the Vorpal sword's owner before the blade can be put into action. Should the Jabberwock slay all of the party and gain possession of the sword, it will dispose of it in the bottom of a quicksand pit or some other inaccessible place. The burbling sound the Jabberwock makes is not fully described in 5th edition, so for a bit more detail we can go into the older lore. The Jabberwock breathes through a gill-like mechanism as well as through its lungs, producing a burbling sound when it is under strain, i.e. charging or fighting, and rapid movement produces an eerie whiffling sound that rises from a barely audible wail at a trot to a screeching banshee-like howl at full charge. The whiffling noise made by a charging Jabberwock is greatly feared by horses and will cause them to throw their riders and flee. The burbling creates a supernatural confusion effect. Any creature that starts its turn within 30 feet of the Jabberwock and is able to hear its burbling must make a DC 18 charisma saving throw. On a failed saving throw, the creature can't take reactions until the start of its next turn, and half the time it may just stand where it is and do nothing, or simply move in a random direction, or actually attack a random creature with a melee weapon or their bare hands if in range, which might include the Jabberwock, but is quite likely to be an ally instead. Victims roll 1d4 to determine which outcome occurs. Although the Jabberwock has weird gill-like growths and lungs for breathing, it doesn't say in the listing if it can breathe underwater, even though the creature is often depicted as having webbed toes and preferring the more dank environments. It's not an amphibian. Again, it seems more troll-like to me. As a legendary creature, the Jabberwock in 5th edition has legendary resistance, so 3 times per day they can just automatically succeed on a saving throw they've rolled a fail on. They also take legendary actions in combat, allowing them to attack other creatures during the combat round, so the Jabberwock could make 2 rending attacks on its turn and a slamming tail attack on 3 more targets during the rest of the round. It can rather opt to make a rend attack with its talons or an attack with its wings. Beating them furiously, each creature within 10 feet of the Jabberwock must make a DC 18 dexterity saving throw or take 1d6 plus 5 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. Due to the creature's burbling attack, accurate descriptions of the Jabberwock are difficult to come by, as dazed survivors often retain only a confused impression of parts and not the whole. However, the sage Ludovicus Humphrey made a careful study of the beast before his untimely demise on a research trip and reported his findings in a journal that, available for purchase in Helruer, has now got a copy located in the vast collections of Candlekeep, securing me another season's accommodations along with my own leather-bound scribblings. The Jabberwock is a solitary creature that apparently treats all other beings it meets as prey. The only exceptions to this rule are druids, which the Jabberwock ignores unless provoked in any way, and sylvan creatures such as dryads, treants, forest gnomes and the like, who can sense its approach and discreetly withdraw in order to avoid a confrontation. Despite its unwavering ferocity, the Jabberwock serves a very important function to the forest. In essence, it is the wood's protector, its very presence serving to keep away most of those who would exploit or destroy the woodlands. My name is AJ Pickett. I produce regular weekly videos about RPG lore. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.